summer-witted, and the first Cinderella story that I chose was the Irish Cinderlad, where Cinderella in the story is the Cinderlad and his name is Beacon. He was portrayed as a very small boy with very large feet. For that one, I wasn't really able to find one that represented the gown, except for maybe the sword that he used to defeat the dragon, because that kind of represented like the magic that was used. The shoes in the Irish Cinderlad, was actually a pair of boots that were worn by the giant that he ended up defeating because of the magic bowl. The stepmother in the story, or who is representing the stepmother, is actually Beacon's stepmother. And she's just as cool and makes Beacon go out and like tend to the cows and stuff when she doesn't make her 3 daughters do that, just like in the Cinderella story we know. The bull is what represents the fairy godmother, and then the bull ends up dying because it gets in a fight with another bull, or the gray bull. And then the tail, the spotted bull is the fairy godmother, and it tells Beacon that it's gonna die, so the bull tells Beacon to twist off his tail and use it as a belt, and that's where the magic would come from. Beacon did just that, and then he was able to defeat the giant and get the shoes from the giant. And then later he ends up going to Kinsale, which is the town that is where he would be at. He just lives out in the country outside of Kinsale. And he goes to this town to get the Princess Finola, which is representing the prince. And she is wanting to thank Beacon, but he ends up seeing his stepmom and 3 sisters, or maybe just the 3 sisters, I can't quite remember. So he rides off on his donkey, and as he's trying to ride off, Princess Finola, who he just saved from a dragon, wants to thank him. So she grabs onto his boot and he rides off because he doesn't want to get caught by his wicked stepsisters, or terrible stepsisters, I guess, not really wicked. She actually pulls the boot off of his leg. And mind you, he has massive giant feet. So she ends up going around just like in the regular Cinderella, and tries to find who the boot belongs to, and everyone, tries to figure out who it is, and then she ends up finding him and living happily ever after. And then for the illustrations, I feel as if it's not a super bright book at all. It is as you can see, that's the giant, and it almost seems more bright where where it's happy and stuff, whereas when it's sad, it's not super bright. Sorry, I know that this is a mess. And this is a pretty sad scene too. This is the spotted bull, that's Beacon. They ended up figuring out that, and then they got married. I feel like there's not really a whole lot of like patterns and textures. There's a lot of different colors though. Like there's colors that are for happy and colors that are for like more solemn, stuff like that. So it goes along with what it's saying. Alright, the second one is I don't remember exactly how to say it. It's Cinderellian. It is a story from the Caribbeans, and the main person that represents Cinderella is the Cinderellian. Probably not saying that right, because she's one that's like looked down on by others around her and gets forced to to stay in and clean and do all that stuff. The thing that the thing that represents the gown in this story is actually a gown, but it's a sky blue, like very, very pretty velvet dress, and then it had a blue headdress to match it, which is shown in her blue, like the title page right there. And then the shoes are represented by some very elegant pink, bright pink slippers. And then the stepmother is actually just the stepmother again. And she's just as wicked as the Cinderella story that we know. She makes the person that portrays Cinderella do the manual labor, house cleaning, like, and doesn't allow her to go out, just as if the same stepmother as in either Cinderella story. The prince is portrayed as Paul. He is portrayed as like very determined, which I think that's what he would be portrayed as in the regular Cinderella story. He's very determined to find who the shoe belongs to, because just like in the regular Cinderella story, the elegant pink slipper just happened to slide off of her foot. The thing that represents the magic is the wand of mahogany that was actually given to the narrator by her mother. And the person that is the fairy godmother is the narrator. And so she represents the godmother because she's there to help and take care of the person that represents Cinderella when no one else is. The thing that represents the ball is actually a ball. But what I found interesting in the story was that the prince didn't get to dance with her for very long, and then she kind of just... I find that interesting about all of them, is that she just kind of left. In this one, I don't know if there's necessarily a lot of textures that I would say, but there's a lot of bright colors. There's bright pink, bright blue, like a bunch of different like colors that like bright green, bright yellow. They're all like, it's a very bright story when they're talking about with the ball and everything. Whereas when they're talking about just when Cinderella and the narrator, it's very more of a somber tone, so it's more like plain colors. I mean, there is still like a little bit of like red and yellow and stuff, but it's not like bright red, bright yellow. It's mainly like warmer colors. And then the last story is Yishin. And Yishin is a young girl who has like a massive amount of beauty, and the stepmother is very jealous of it. And even the father's not there to be able to, like, help take care of Yashin. The gown is represented by a gown in this story, but this gown is a very blue gown. And she has a king feather cloak. This is a Chinese Cinderella story. The slippers are represented by woven golden slippers that had like the texture of fish scales. And then the soles were actually golden, like solid gold. But it was really weird because they weren't heavy, like, at all, which you would think they would be. And they were very, very tiny. She had very, very small feet. The stepmother in this story is actually represented by the stepmother of Yashin, who, like, was married to her dad before he passed away. And she was very jealous of Yashin's beauty. Like, she was absolutely stunning, like, far more beautiful than the stepmother's daughter. So she was very jealous. And then I actually found a few things that were the magic part of it. At first, it was the fish bones after the stepmother had killed the fish because, she's wicked. And the fish bones came from the fish that portrayed the godmother's, portrayed the fairy godmother, sorry. And then the second thing that ended up portraying the magic was the slippers, actually, because the fish bones would talk to her and, like, she'd talk to them, but the fish bones told her not to lose one, and she was in a hurry trying to leave, and she actually never danced with the prince in this one, which was a little weird to me. But the slipper ended up representing the magic in the end. The king represented the prince in the story, which isn't far off. But he actually didn't ever see Yashin, which was really interesting to me, that he fell in love with her and had to know whose slipper this was. But he didn't even, like, dance with her or meet with her or anything at the Spring Festival, which represents the ball. Because most of the time in Chinese culture, you wouldn't see balls, you would see more festivals and everything. But the king actually got the slipper given to him as a gift, because it got sold to a merchant and then it got given to the king as a gift. So he became fascinated with this slipper. So he set out to find who the slipper belonged to, and then he ended up going around to houses like normal, trying to figure out who it was. After he set it in a, like, rotunda type thing, and then Yashin went in the middle of the night and took it, and he let her because he noticed how small her feet were. The illustrations from this culture were very, it wasn't bland, it was more like blended, so it's not just like hard lines or anything in the pictures, and it makes it seem more, like, have the ability to transition, which seems a little, like, easier to follow. And for me, the, gold represents, like, wealth, so I felt like the king was like, oh, this is, like, a solid gold slipper, like, this has to be, like, it has to belong to someone that's absolutely beautiful. So for me, the slippers kind of tie all of the story together, with it looking like fish scales, with the fish being the fairy godmother, and the fish bones, and the gold being very, very expensive, making the king to believe that it was a beautiful person that the slipper belonged to, which Yashin was. Thank you.